Welcome to the Under the Hat podcast, the show where we talk about everything and anything that is top of mind in education. The goal is to provide meaningful conversation to what is currently happening in our classrooms. Stories, pains, moments of success. We want to hear it all. Hey friends, welcome back to Under the Hat. Super excited to be here this evening. And wherever you are, whether you're watching it live or in the future, do a shout out. Let us know where you're from, what you're doing, whether you're in the chat right now, or maybe you're watching this in the future at some point, and that is a-okay as well. I do have a full week this week of awesome people coming on the show. Super excited for this show, for the one that's, I believe, what day is it? Oh, Thursday. And then I have another one Saturday morning. And so we have a full lineup for you all. And so tonight, though, I'm super grateful to have my good friend Michelle Manning on the show. Michelle and I have done low-key some work together. We've collaborated together, and so just super excited to have this conversation with you tonight, Michelle. But first, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm so excited to be here and collaborate with you again. This is exciting. Congratulations on this new endeavor.
Yeah. We were kind of talking about that before we kind of popped on live, and just this whole like, hey, I'm gonna start a new thing. I'm gonna put myself out there, and I low key have turned this into a fourth-time job. But I'm loving it, and I'm loving the conversations and the relationships I'm building, and get to connect with old friends like yourself, Michelle. And so Michelle, like, kind of looking into the work that you've done when we're talking about inclusion, accessibility, and like, the depth of knowledge you have on how technology plays a role with all that. So before we get into that, though, for anybody that maybe doesn't know you, has not seen you on social, anything like that, maybe some context, like how you got into education, the work that you've done there, and possibly maybe where you see this headed for you as an educator.
Sure. This is my 30th year in my current school district. I'm currently an instructional technology integration specialist in Smithtown Central School District on Long Island in New York. Like I said, this is my 30th year. I started as a fourth grade teacher, and it's actually kind of a funny story. When I got hired, originally they hired me for first grade. And about a week before school started, the principal called me and he said, Michelle, I saw on your resume that you took a computer class in college, so, which was a thing back then in the early 90s to take a computer class. And so he said, the district is going to pilot something brand new, and we're actually going to try to put a computer in the classroom. So only fourth grades are going to get 5 desktop computers in the classroom. So he switched me to fourth grade because I had experience using a computer. And that sort of catapulted my career with the technology integration. So we would only the fourth grade had 5 computers. I would do centers and stations. And the second year, as 24 years old, here I am doing staff development and PD, and because people didn't know what a floppy disk was. And so now here I am at the end of it's crazy. Here I am at the end of my career now as the instructional specialist for the one of two for the entire district. So it's crazy how it's gone full circle. And as far as the other element of what I'm going to be talking about today, I was very blessed that as a first year teacher, a woman named Sue Seiler, she was a special ed teacher, and she took me under her wing and she was my mentor. And she said to me, hey, I want to try this thing where I take some of my special ed students and put them in a gen ed classroom. And that's where inclusion was born in Smithtown. So she taught me so much. So even though I was a fourth grade gen ed teacher, and then I was a sixth grade gen ed teacher for 20 years, I was very blessed to have a lot of special education teachers work closely with me. And working with them, I became very passionate about using technology to support, and not just your special ed students or your 504 students, all of the students in the classroom. This is really best practices, and it will benefit the teachers too. So it's something that I've become very excited about and very passionate about too.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that last part, because I remember going through my own credentialing process, right? Like we all had to do that. And I remember just hearing professors and such talk inclusion, but it was almost like wait, so are we only being inclusive for just this part of the population, right? And I think since then, though, because that's been a minute, right? Like since then, we are now, at least people that I talk with, are more purposeful of like how we're using that word, right?
Yes.
So like for you, when you see inclusion, um, what does that mean to you? Like, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, right? Because like, I think for a lot of people, like their minds may shift or go directly to like, oh, sped, right?
Mhm.
Or
Yeah.
and that gets into like maybe like culturally responsive teaching. So like kind of maybe like what does that mean to you in terms of what is an inclusion, a classroom that has, you know, true authentic inclusion in it and that is completely inclusive? What does that look like? What does that feel like? Like what could the environment kind of
I mean,
show if you walk into a room for the first time that has that?
it's meeting the needs of the students wherever they are at. And it, again, it's not necessarily a student with an IEP or a 504. It could be a student that excels academically, but maybe they're just having a bad day. They're going through it, a sick parent, or that day, their cat died the night before and they're just in a bad place that day and they need a little extra support. Or they were out with the flu for a week and now they're coming back and they're a little bit of behind. So having resources for students to help them whenever they need them. And again, some of this is just best practices too. Like, for example, we've all shown videos in class. And so when we are showing a video to 25 to 30 students in the classroom, you've got students sitting in the back of the room. They're distracted by the recess class outside or even the clock ticking. Let's think about us when we're home and we're watching TV. What do we get to do? We get to rewind the TV. We get to pause the
Mm,
TV. We can record it and go back and watch it at a time that's more convenient for us. So why aren't we doing that for our students? We can use, and somebody had posted when we were advertising this episode, what were my favorite ed tech tools? They asked for five. I kind of have six. So I'm like a mom. I can't play favorites. I love them all. But whether you use Edpuzzle, Kami, Quizzes, Formative, Book Creator, BrainPop, like they all allow you to, first of all, integrate a video safely. If it's a YouTube video, we're taking
mm,
out those ads and recommended videos at the end. But now the students could watch it with headphones. So you're minimizing distractions. They can rewind it, they can pause it. And now let's take it a step further for somebody who may have a processing disorder or whatever it may be. Now we can add closed captions. We can add translations. We can slow down the speed of the video so that they could process it. We can translate it using these ed tech tools. It's whatever the student needs, we are now providing those accommodations or modifications, whatever word you prefer to use. So it's just best practices, because if we're at home and we can rewind and pause, why aren't we allowing our students in class to do that as well? So to
yeah,
me,
I just
that's what
love.
I mean by inclusion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, and I love that because that was a conversation I would have with a lot of my colleagues when I was still in the high school classroom, where I would have, you know, talk with teachers and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I have like in one period they had, I don't know, like 20 students that were on a plan on an IEP." And
Mm.
and they're like, "It's so overwhelming. How am I supposed to provide all these accommodations and modifications and how am I supposed to differentiate?" And then I got to a point I was like, wait, if you're using the technology appropriately and you're providing these levels of supports for all your students, that's like a whole burden off your shoulders as a
Right.
teacher, right? And so like and so I remember having those conversations with like my, you know, my friends that were veteran teachers. And I remember having towards the end there, I did have a student teacher, and her and I had that conversation. And she came to that conclusion on her own. She's like, "Wait, if you just take Steve, if you just take of how you're teaching and you just apply it to all learners, like end of discussion. And you're doing, not only is it good for all learners, but it also makes your life as a teacher easier because you're not having to like navigate as much." I mean, think about, I would say like, you know, 30 years ago, oh, that would have been a challenge, right? But now that
Right.
we have the tool, we have the technology now
Yes, yes.
to make
We
all this
have it.
happen, right?
Use it. And
Yeah.
like you said, we're also helping the teacher as well. A lot of teachers see technology, or now if with AI coming out, it's one more thing to learn or another thing on your plate. But I try to tell the teachers that I support, we're swapping it out. You're already giving an assessment. So instead of giving the assessment on paper and pencil, let's use these tools that we have. Like, Formative is a great tool for giving a formal assessment, and you can embed all of the support. So, like, I often saw, like I said, I was in middle school for 20 years, before I took this
Mm.
role, and an email would come through, and a teacher would say, "I have to read a test to students. Does anybody have an empty classroom, fifth period?" So every period of the day, they're trying to find an empty room to bring their special ed students to an empty classroom so that they could read the test. So now you've just lost at least 5 minutes of class time moving them from point A to point B. And now I would watch the teacher, or even in elementary school, where they can't leave the classroom and they're sitting at the kidney shaped table and they have the five students. Student A is ready to move on to the next question. The next student just remembered the answer to a previous question, so now they want to go back a couple questions. Now the other student is embarrassed to ask you to read it for the fourth time because they still don't understand. So why are we having that teacher sit there? You're not meeting the needs of your students when they don't all need the same thing. So using tools that have text to speech, no, yes, I'm right, text to speech. I always get those two confused. Text to speech, we're empowering the students. Like, we empower them to watch the video at their pace and pause it and rewind it. Let's empower them to have the test read to them. They can slow down the audio again. They can play it as many times as they want without being embarrassed to hear it again. They can move at their own pace. So, and then I think about our special area teachers. I had a friend of mine, he's a family consumer science teacher. Hopefully he signed in, he said he was going to watch. But I think about the art teacher, the music teacher, the family consumer science teacher. They don't have the special ed teacher in their classroom. So now they're required to provide the modifications or accommodations for the students. And how are they supposed to do that in a classroom of 25 students? So instead of you doing it, let's use the technology to do it for them. There are so many different tools. And I mentioned Formative, but there are other tools that I mentioned earlier that do the same thing. So the teacher is saving time too. And now you don't have to sit there and read the test. You can focus on other areas, monitoring their progress. What are they actually working on? Seeing their work in real time. And it's grading it for you. So now you're saving even more time. So it's just so beneficial for the students and the teachers as well.
Yeah, I think uh, the 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 tools and the technology that are being used to save teachers time, I always see that statement, and then there's always a period there, and I'm like, wait, no, keep going with that. Whether you're advertising for a tool or you're talking about a best practice in the classroom, like, yes, it saves teachers time, and that time can now be used for blank, right?
Right.
And to me, that's the piece that's always missing when I see, like, at a conference, like, you see vendors, right? And I'm low key that vendor sometimes, right? But like it's one of those things where, like, you know you have to have the and the and there can be for things like provide better high quality feedback, or the and is like, okay, now I can conference with learners and have more like face to face time, right, like with them. But also it's like to humanize it a little bit, gives you time for like your own self, your own family, and to me, like, that's part of it, in the sense of like, if we can better take care of ourselves as educators, now we're setting ourselves up for success to be the best versions of ourselves when we are in the classroom.
Right.
So that's kind of just my kind of big takeaway with what you just said, Michelle. So I do have a question regarding the tools, but before I do that, I think people need the context of like where you are in your current role, because you kind of talked about the grade levels you taught, like your experience with technology, but now you're more in more of a leadership role, and so um, maybe speak on that and like what is your role, how you support teachers, and kind of the work that you're doing right now in your district.
So, like I said, my current title is the Instructional Technology Integration Specialist, so tech coach for short. And I currently support 7 elementary schools, so I'm looking at approximately 250
Mm.
teachers. And it's a struggle because 7 buildings, my office is in an 8th building, so it's hard for me, but I just keep trying to cast wide nets to support the teachers. So sometimes teachers will send me a lesson and say, I want to digitize this, and I'll make a riddle room, or I'll do something fun, or I'll make a book creator template or a Kami template. And then some teachers are ready to fly and use that on their own. So, for example, St. Patrick's Day is coming up. So I put together an email full of resources from all different ed tech tools. Like, here, they're done for you. Just you're ready to use. And some teachers can use them and fly. Some teachers will reach out and say, Michelle, can you come in and teach the lesson? So that's probably my
Mm.
favorite part of the job, when I get to go into the classroom and teach. And before I said, I'm like a mom to all the ed tech platforms. I can't pick a favorite, but when I go into the classroom, I feel like grandma, because literally the students will cheer, Miss Manning's here. And then I get to have fun and leave. So I don't grandma, go in, have fun, and get out. So sometimes I'll teach, and sometimes I'll just do the introductory lesson to show them the tools and how the platform works, and then I'll go back to do the curriculum-based lesson. So the first time it's risk-free. Play, delete, make mistakes, it's okay. This doesn't count. So, I'll do the demo lesson and then go back for the curriculum-based lesson, and then I'll make activities that are curriculum-based as well. Like, currently, I'm working on digitizing our social studies platforms. In New York State, there is no textbook that aligns with New York State standards. No textbook. So the teachers are pulling together, and our district has an outline and a curriculum. Don't get me wrong, we definitely have resources, but I'm currently putting them together in Book Creator. So now they'll have a digital textbook, and the students will have a digital notebook. So that's really what my career is. I wear a lot of different hats. Like I said, I'm employed by my school district. I'm talking about some of my favorite ed tech platforms. I'm not paid by them. They're not, asking me to promote them in any way. These are just tools that I'm familiar with and that I'm successful with. But to loop back to what we were saying about teachers having time, the number one thing I hear in my role is, I don't have time to learn these platforms, and I don't have time to digitize my lessons. So that's what I try to use. And I try to tell the teachers, the time that you would have spent grading, let's invest that time on the front end, making the digital assessment or making the
Mhm.
digital notebook, and then you'll be saving time on the other end. So I do a lot of different things in my role.
No, and that sounds like a lot of fun though, right? Like it
It
feels like
is.
it's not it's not so routine, I would
Mm-mm.
imagine. Like it's a
Every
different
day is
day.
different. I always
Yeah.
have a ton of tabs open, and I start this project, start that project, and then an
Yeah.
email comes in, and sometimes it's, an emergency, "This isn't working," and record a quick video, send it over.
Right.
Um, I
Right.
I love, love, love my job. I
That's
absolutely love what I do.
that's amazing. That's amazing because that's the ultimate goal, right? Is just
Mhm.
enjoying what we're doing. Um, I do want to say like I really I loved how you put it in terms of like your approach of how you're training teachers. Like and Sophie, my friend Sophie's in the chat
Yep.
here.
Hi,
So,
Sophie.
so Michelle, yeah. So she's like, hey, hi Michelle. And so because I know this part of it is really going to resonate with Sophie, and because I've heard her say this before as well, as like you kind of teach the tool first in isolation of curriculum, right? That's kind of what I
Mhm.
heard, and let that play, let that like risk free, like you're
Yes.
not going to get punished in any way for not completely knowing a tool, and then go back and then try to embed the curriculum into it. And I just love that approach. That's an approach I used when I would start the school year. Be like, hey, here are the top kind of like what you're saying. Like I had my top 4 or 5 tools that I use in the classroom. Really dived into those that first week or two, and then we get jamming with the curriculum. So
Right.
again, I just love that approach of like isolating that and scaffolding that experience for our learners. Um,
And I
yeah.
think it's important too because it teaches them to be problem solvers because I feel that students a lot is done for them and they're looking what do I even though you see the memes and the gifs and all over social media how many times we repeat directions, everybody
Mm.
has one of those satire videos about repeating directions 1,000 times, and I find that students aren't problem solvers. There's a great YouTube video if you look it up about the escalator where somebody is walking up the escalator and the escalator stops and then they don't know what to do and they're just standing there screaming for help and they could just walk up the escalator. And I feel sometimes some students, I don't like to make blanket statements, but when you're doing it in a risk-free environment, I tell them click around, play, try it. You're not going to break it, you're not doing anything wrong, so that they have those problem solving strategies, and I feel like they learn it better if they tried it themselves. And then we integrate maybe with the do now or doing it in center so there's a little bit of support before you go to a high stakes like an assessment type activity.
That is so true of like it is intimidating for people in general, like when they see a new platform, a new tech tool, whatever it is, like, ooh, I don't want to click anything.
Right.
um and I feel and Sophie can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel Sophie and I had this conversation today of like uh of like that's true for teachers too, like when we're training teachers. And it's so interesting to me because like a lot of the things that are really good for students, I'm now on the adult ed side of things where I'm like, wait, this, what I used to do with students is actually also really good for our adult learners, for training our teachers, for teaching our teachers. And so like this idea of like, hey, you're not going to break it.
Right.
It's okay.
Right.
Like it, and I even tell like Michelle Levy knows I teach like a little night class, not little, it's super passionate about it, but adult ed computer class, right? You would love it. Like if you were there watching me teach, like you would love this class. But like I tell them all the time, I'm like, you're not gonna break it. If you break it, I'll give you $5. Like that's
Yeah.
impressive. Like if
Right.
you break a Cami or a Word doc or like whatever it is, like but just getting people just comfortable with just like clicking around, playing, like
Right.
see what does that do? What does that do? Because
First
that piece
thing is
can be
control
overwhelming.
Z. Teach them control Z.
Yes,
Undo, refresh.
undo. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
no,
actually
it's good, good.
I'm doing clerical training now too, with the
Okay,
transition to Google a few years ago. So I do a lot of PD with adults as well.
yeah,
And my favorite thing, whether it's from teachers or clerical or admin, that's not stressful at all. When I'm training all the administrators and superintendents on a Google Meet, but
right.
they're wonderful. We have an incredible administration in my district. But my favorite line is when people say to me, "I'm old. I'm too old to learn this." I'm like, first of all, I'm older than you. I've been teaching for over 30 years. I've got a few years on you. So let's take that excuse off the table. I'm like, when in the classroom, my favorite word was yet. You don't know it yet. You haven't learned it yet. So that's something else that I'm passionate about. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's okay. You're not going to break it. Click, try. Let's figure it out. Let's have fun and play.
yeah.
And the
And
kids are,
and it's
they do.
yeah, and they do, and they end up doing it, and it's super rewarding with whoever you're teaching. Like when you
Hmm.
see that they see the progress, right? Like they see it
Right.
in their eyes, like, whoa, I know a lot more than I do now. And that, so the class I teach, there's various different ages and comfort levels of technology in that class. But the moment I tell them, like, oh, by the way, I know it's like a basic computer class, but you're gonna learn how to build a website, and they're just like, no way, no way. They're like a lot of like, there's no way that I would ever
Panic.
be able to do that. Yeah, and panic a little bit, right? Because I always preface the class with that, like you're gonna walk away learning how to build a website. Um, what they're really learning is Google Sites, but
Yes.
that's still a website. That's
It's
still a website.
Legos. Google Sites to
It's
me is Legos.
Legos,
You're just building blocks.
building blocks, teaching like branding, teaching like marketing skills, and kind of again the problem solving. But like it's always like, and I'm gonna hit that unit like in about a week or two. But it's always amazing when they walk away. They're like, oh, I can do this now. Like that's one of the best moments I think that we have as educators, is like when our
Hmm.
students say like, oh, I can do this. I didn't before, but now I can,
Right.
regardless of the subject and the age. So
Right.
it's incredible.
And I love when I'm in the classroom working with the students and I'm showing them how to do something and they're trying it. And sometimes they'll show me something that I didn't know it could do. They figure something out. I'm like, oh yeah, I could do that. Show me how you did that. Like, that's pretty cool. And the students figure things out, and because they have that fearless attitude and they click and they play, and I learn from them just as much. So it's
Yeah.
exciting. And the teachers just, again, I understand they don't have the time to learn it, but and that's something I struggle with, is finding the opportunities to have that professional development. 15 minutes in a faculty meeting is difficult, or I have a Google Calendar linked in my email signature, and I'm like, you sign up for a time that works for you when you're ready for this, and I'll come help you. And the students could do it. You just have to set it up, and eventually, like, circling back, we'll be saving you time, and this is best practices for you and the students as well. And usually, once I go in, they're like, "Oh, that's it." And I always hate when I go in. I'm like, "Oh, it's easy," and I say, "Wait, time out. It's easy for me because I know how to do it, but I promise after I show it to you, it is easy. It's not difficult. It's easy to learn once I show it to you." And then they fly with it and take off. So it's exciting to see.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I so I, I'm trying to in my head go back um to what I was hoping to ask you earlier, because like I really wanted you to dive in more into like your role, like what you're doing now,
Mhm.
and you did that amazing. So when you're looking at ed tech tools, right? And this is the question I asked of someone else on the show previously. I'm just curious about your own take on it. But like when you're looking at any tool, like whether it's like something that's maybe more assessment based, more like a creativity tool, like what accessibility, whatever the case is, do you have maybe at your district or like in your own mind, possibly, like, do you have your own like vetting process or maybe like rubric of like, this is what constitutes a good tool that will have high student outcome? Like, do you have that, or is that something more like that happens organically for you?
Um, Honestly, it's whatever tools the district has purchased is available to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have the credit cards. Like you talked about going to conferences, and the companies,
Mm,
they try to pull me in to sell their product. I'm like, I don't have the credit card. I don't get to purchase anything. So I learn the tools that we have, but sometimes I do see tools that I'm excited and passionate about, and that I've worked with companies, and I have, brought it back to my IT department. And I said, I
mm,
really think that this is a great tool. But so what I look for is that they're user friendly, like an easy platform. Um,
mm,
so it's not too complicated. You don't have to go too far down the rabbit hole um, to work, because again, we're really trying to save teachers some time, and I'm looking for tools that it's not, like I said before, one more thing. I want something that they can use in conjunction with their current lessons, things that are maybe
mm.
classroom ready, that they could just easily swap out that paper for, that will enhance the lesson and make it better for all of the students and the teacher. So to answer your question, no, I don't have a rubric. I just go by what I think is easily integratable. Is that a word? Easily integrated into the classroom, easily integrated into the curriculum, student friendly, teacher friendly. Um, and a lot of these tools have the accessibility built in. I'm not looking for tools with accessibility. I fall in love with the tools, and I'm finding a lot of companies now are adding more and more accessibility features,
Mm.
whether it's text to speech, extended time, reducing the number of choices from four to two so that it's easy to differentiate. And with the AI that's embedded in these platforms now, it will do the differentiating for you. It'll change the reading level. It will take away two of the choices. Or on the other side, there's a couple platforms now. If you're making multiple choice questions, I'll type in the question and then I just have to hit AI, and AI will put in the four choices for me, because I'm supporting
Mm.
grades K through 5, every subject. So they'll send me a lesson like on molecules. I'm like, I don't know. Thank goodness you have the answer key, whatever it might be. And then I have to come up with the distractors and the fake answers. I'm like, I'm lucky I know the right answer. I'm not smarter than a fifth grader apparently, and I don't know all the answers. So with these AI tools that are embedded, they're just adding so much more to support the teachers as well as the students. So that's a long-winded answer to say no, but I do have things that I look for.
Yeah. No, that makes sense though. Like, cause like the first part of what you said was like, uh, can it be implemented
Mhm,
without us like running in circles, right? Like easy to implement. Um, and then also like, easy to learn, easy to
mhm,
digest, easy to, um, go alongside or enhance the already existing curriculum. Cause that was kind of the big thing, at least from like my vantage point when I was still in the high school classroom, was like, okay, here's another tool, but how much do we have to create in that tool, right? and
right.
and and so but now, like, AI being, you know more, I guess, involved with these tools, not all of them but enough of them to where,
Mhm,
yeah, there's, let the AI kind of generate some of the gaps that we may have,
mhm.
or some of the
I
roadblocks that we experience.
I like to think of AI and all of these ed tech platforms as your digital co-teacher. I mean, you are still, we're not going to be replaced. Somebody literally texted me today, AI is going to replace us. I'm like, no, 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 but it can help us. We'll get this far and then AI can bring us a little closer to the finish line so that we don't have to do it, but we're still creating and putting in the content, and it's just helping us out a little bit and doing a little bit of the work for us. So I try not to show the teachers, hey, look at all these AI platforms, look at the platforms you're already using for the curriculum you're already using, and now let that help you be your co-teacher to do some of it for you in the
Yeah.
creation end and in the grading end as well.
Right. Yeah. And I also want to kind of go back a little bit and say like how I love that you're, um doing some of the modeling and some of the work for the teachers, right?
Mhm,
Like, you kind of mentioned that, like, oh, I have a teacher who, I'm trying to use this tool with this kind of learning experience with maybe this part of the curriculum, and you're providing that example for them. um is that something that you're doing like case by case, or do you have like overall, not overall, but like maybe a catalog of like examples that maybe like everybody in your district can view? I'm just curious because we kind of
mhm.
had this conversation with the guest previously too, just maybe like diversifying this conversation a little bit in terms of how you're supporting teachers from the coach standpoint.
Well, sometimes a teacher will come to me and say, we're doing fractions next week, or I have this lesson, it's really, really boring. How can we make it
Mm,
fun? So when I create something, then of course I send it out to all of the grade level teachers across the district. And I also have a Google Classroom where I post all my resources. But
mm,
typically, teachers who are so busy, they'll shoot me a message. Hey, Michelle, where's that riddle room you made on whatever it is? And then I'll just send them the resources. So sometimes I'll know something that's coming up and I'll create lessons. Like I said, I see what holidays are coming up. So I usually will generate an email. By the way, February, the shortest month, has the most holidays for teachers. We're like inundated on like Black History Month and Valentine's Day and the 100th day of school and Groundhog's Day and leap year. I think there are like 7 or 8 holidays in February. So sometimes I just cast that wide net. Here's something. If you see something that interests you, reach out. Or sometimes somebody will come with me with a specific, like they'll email me a PDF and say, do something with this. So, and now something that's sort of propelling technology in the classroom a little bit. New York, our state's assessments, 3 through 8, takes an ELA assessment and a math assessment every spring. And the state is now requiring that they take it online. It's computer based. And we have a couple
mm,
years to roll it out. So my district is on board and it's been very successful. It's been very successful in other schools around the state that have been doing it for a couple years. So now that's sort of been my opening some doors. Like, okay, let's get them comfortable doing math tools online. And it doesn't have to look exactly like the computer based test. We're not testing to the test. teaching to the test. But let's
Mhm.
get them comfortable typing fractions or using different math tools so that they're comfortable with it. And then they're starting to see the advantages of it. And another positive aspect of using this, and you had said much earlier, is being able to monitor and giving them that feedback. I love that a lot of these ed tech tools are giving the students that immediate feedback. We all know the expression practice makes perfect. I don't agree with that. Practice makes permanent. So if you have a student doing an entire ditto, I'll show you how old I am, a ditto of, 30 multiplication problems or long division problems, they do the whole page, they hand it in. By the time the teacher gets to grade it, give the feedback, hand it back to the student. Now it's 2 or 3 days later, or even the next day, you're on to the next lesson. And they've just practiced that foundation wrong. And they're not ready
Mhm.
to build upon it. And here's hoping they even look at the feedback that you provided. As a middle school teacher, I would hand back 100 papers, and there was always one student who would throw it out right in front of me. I'd be like, dude, can you wait till the hallway at least to throw it out? Like, pretend to read all of the work that I put back, giving you feedback on your essay. Like, come on, pretend to look a little interested. So a lot of these ed tech tools will give them that immediate feedback before they practice it 25 times and practice it wrong. They know right away, oh, hold on, I'm getting all these wrong. And the teachers can embed that feedback. Wait, you need common denominators or you need the reciprocal, whatever it is. It's just, again, beneficial for the students, beneficial for the teachers, saving them time, and it makes those lessons more meaningful if they're getting that immediate feedback. So I just think it's so important.
Yeah, and it reminds me of like what my focus was when I was in the social studies classroom, and that was like the writing. Like my students did
Mhm.
so much writing. There were so many essays, and there were moments where they're like, "I hate this," but like my 10th graders, they would leave me and they would they were ready. Like they're like, give me an essay.
Yep.
I will show you exactly how it should be done, kind of thing. And they almost got competitive with it over time. And largely that had to do, I feel, with the technology because back in the day, like you have kids, oh, go write an essay. Um, cool. You write it, whether it's on paper or you print it out. Like, remember those days? Like, my
Yes.
printer's not working.
Right.
Like the
You
night
ran out of I
before.
had I had a typewriter in college, and if I
Or
ran out of a typewriter ribbon, oh,
oh no, see,
yeah.
that's another struggle, right? And so, we would turn in these essays, and how long would it take for the teacher to get them back to you? By the time you got it back, you're like, girl, I forgot what I was writing about. Like
Right,
I was
right,
like I was just like you just forget, right? We can't retain that for that long. So, but what I really thrived at, I feel, was like that immediate feedback. So giving them feedback while they're writing.
right.
And so being able to have that workflow there and then there it forces them to actually read the feedback because they see
Oh,
the
oh,
feedback while they're
yeah.
writing. They're like, oh no, I because they do want to get a good grade. Like
Right, right.
and there's that part of it. Like whether they want to learn the content, that may be different, especially with what I taught. But like they want to get a good grade. So when they see the feedback, they're actually reading and doing something with that feedback. And that would not be possible without the technology, which I
Right.
feel is really transformative.
And I was actually talking about getting that feedback with the writing before the teacher even gets involved. I was speaking to my colleague, Amory McQuaid. She would be a great guest one day. We had chatted about that too. She's the
Mm,
assistive technology coach in my district. So she does a lot more assistive tech, new platforms, special devices. But one thing that we were talking about is that when the students are doing their typing, all students, they can have it read back to them. And we all know we're our worst proofreaders because we know what it's supposed to say. Like, how many times have you typed a text and you looked at it, and as soon as you hit send, or the email, as soon as you hit send, you realize it didn't make sense because you know what it was supposed to say. So if you have the computer or the program, whatever platform you're using, if you use that text to speech, it'll read it back to you. And you're like, wait a minute, that's not what I wrote. That's not what I meant to say. And so it's great to get a more authentic, what are the words I'm looking for? Perspective of your accuracy. So it's just a great tool for all students. Again, that inclusion, getting that support for everybody, no matter what type of essay you're writing, how advanced your writing is. I just think that's so important. And then taking it the next step a little further, alternative assessments, which is something else that we could chat about. But that immediate feedback comes in a lot of forms. Um,
Yeah.
it's
No, yeah, and
important.
it's so important now, and especially considering it's at our fingertips, right? Like,
Yes.
it kinda going back to, like, the way things were to the way things are, why not provide these kind of supports and make it feel like, and my students would say this to me, they're like, "Martinez, like, it feels like you're there supporting us regardless of where we are," right? And because, like,
Hmm.
they'll be working on something, and if I'm at home, and not that I was spending, hours and hours working, like, in the evening or whatever, but, like, I knew, like, around 4 o'clock, some of my students were at practice doing track, but others there, I knew some of them, they're like, oh, they're in their resource classroom right now. Like, why not
Hmm.
support them while I have this extra time, since, like,
Right.
certain things are getting automated, right? So
Right.
for me, it's a no-brainer. But yeah, like, the feedback and the timely real-time feedback is such a big piece of how we're teaching now.
It really, really is. And also having, to bring it back to the accessibility and inclusive, I also like the idea of using the technology for alternative assessments as well. Like, does it have to be a multiple choice test? Does it have to be an essay? Sometimes, yes, writing is very important. Please don't come at me in the comments. Writing is important. They need to, write an essay or a letter. But does it have to be every time? Because that's not how all students can show what they know. So, as for some students, writing is an obstacle. So, let's have other opportunities available, whether they're making a video or making a book, something a little more creative, they can still express their knowledge and using technology to take those obstacles out of the way. Um, like, for example, Brain Pop, I did a presentation on this the other day. In Brain Pop, everybody knows that they're just watching videos on Brain Pop. Everybody loves Tim and Moby and Anna. It's great. But there's an opportunity within that technology that most teachers already have for the students to express themselves. It's not just consumption. A lot of people
Mhm.
see the computer, too much screen time, too much screen time. If they're not just consuming, they could also express. So in Brain Pop, they could actually make their own movie. So you could take the writing out of it and they could bring in the images and the graphics and they could record their own voice. And then I had them alternating slides. So one slide, like the robot Moby, so they have to type it in what they want the robot to say. But then when they played it back and they heard the robot reading it, they're like, wait a second, that's not what I wrote. I'm like, no, that is what you wrote. That's not what you meant, but that's what you wrote. So by utilizing these supports, they're actually becoming better writers and better readers because they're getting that feedback. You just wrote that paragraph and that's what you wrote, that's not what you meant. So they would have to go back and revisit it and edit it, but they're excited because they're making a Brain Pop video or they're publishing their own book that they could publish online for everybody to read, so that motivates them to go back and look at it. And then sometimes the computer is going to read, like, I remember one student made a project and it kept saying live instead of lives. It was saying lives instead of lives, and we couldn't change it. So we had to go back and restructure his sentence to use different words. So again, improving those writing skills. Well, what are you trying to say? What are you trying to express? So it could take your writing beyond the writing and that feedback. And there's just so many opportunities for all students, whatever level they're at. And it could just be a topic that they didn't understand. There were classes in college I got A's, and there were classes I'm like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to pass this. It was just something I didn't understand. So I think that we have to get away from it's just for special ed or 504 students or students that aren't identified, like Sophie said in the chat, for whatever reason. It's we all have strengths and weaknesses. We all have good days and bad days. So let's use these tools that we have.
Yeah, and it's kind of that to expand that conversation too, or expand this conversation is, well, I you want to give that choice. You want to make sure that you're supporting the learners with the tools themselves, but more of like on the instructional side of it. What you just said reminded me of like this difference between grading and assessing, right? And for me, the assessing was more important. Like the grading, that'll be that score that's in that grade book, right? And that'll be like that's the score that goes in that report card, right? And that's all fine. Like that's more, and that's fine. But like for me, it's like you talk about like the metacognition and the self-reflection that students can have, really taking that ownership because of the tools providing that assessment. Like
Yes.
the feedback they're getting, that's a form of an assessment, and especially if it's alongside an actual human, a teacher, a caring
Right.
teacher who's like, hey, here's what it's telling you. Now let's pivot over here to get you into the right understanding or direction. To me, that's powerful, right?
Yeah.
Because like when Michelle, I don't know about you, but when I was in school, it was such a focus on the grading, What grade am I going to get? What grade? And my
Is this
teachers were
being
that way too.
graded?
Is
How
this
many
being
times is
graded?
being graded?
Yeah.
Does
And
spelling count? Like, are you going to spell it
no,
right
it
if
doesn't
spelling
count.
counts and spell it wrong if it doesn't count? If you know how to spell it, spell it. Like, exactly.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm gonna spell everything wrong now because you didn't say
Because
that.
it doesn't count,
Um,
right?
it doesn't count. But yeah, like that's like that to me is like was the more powerful moments of the classroom towards the end for me there. Like of just like it's the assessment and it's the actual like human touch of like how to use
Right.
the technology transformatively. So I love that. Um, I know, Michelle, that you did, not to shift gears here. I'm loving this conversation, by the way. Uh,
I'll go in all
uh,
tangents, shift away.
yeah. No, so I do know that, and I'm curious if there's any bites on this. So I know that for the promotion of this episode, you would post a wonderful question that I've not seen from a guest yet. Is like you kind of posted up like, hey, what do you want us to talk about, kind of thing, and I love that. Did you get any bites on that? I know that Samantha had posted something, but
That was
curious
a
if anything.
great. Yeah, so sorry to interrupt. Yeah, so
No,
Samantha
no, no.
had posted, what, um, how did she word it? What accessibility or what accommodations and modifications do you feel aren't getting ed tech love? So what needs aren't being addressed by educational technology? And I posted it on a lot of my social media channels. I asked my colleague, the assistive technology, I'm like, she's, yeah, she's the expert on assistive technology. She knows all these tools that I don't know. And she felt that there was a lot that were addressing all the different needs. But she actually brought back the fact about using what Sophie called in the chat oral rehearsal. That's what I got from her feedback about using these tools, not just for instruction, but using them for the feedback. But I reached out to a lot of my special ed teacher friends. And so if anybody thinks of anything, if you're watching this, please reach out to me or Steve on social media and let us know, hey, these are things that are lacking that we would love to see. And we could find alternatives or bring it back to the ed tech companies that we both collaborate with. Um, and the other question that somebody asked were what were my favorite ed tech tools. I think Samantha asked that also. So, and I feel bad because I work with so many different companies. So, there and I love them all because they all bring different features and different opportunities to the table, and I use them in different parts of instruction and lesson, whether it's introduction, creativity, flipping the classroom, and so on. So she asked for top five. The other question, so I had top six. Um, I want you like go in alphabetical order. They all have different features, and they also all overlap in some way. So I love Edpuzzle. I love Kami, Quizzes, Formative, Book Creator, and BrainPop. Those are, and I feel they're all pretty popular. Most of them have free features that you're able to use. They're classroom ready. They're user friendly, and they all have accessibility features built in. So empowering the students, and you had said that earlier, Steve, it's so important to empower the students to take ownership and control of their learning and have the tools there so that they're empowered. They can help themselves. It's so important. And I just distracted myself too with one of our tangents and shifting gears.
That's okay. That's okay. No, no, no. This is a, and for those that are listening, this is a safe
Oh,
space, right?
I
We
remembered.
have
Okay, but go ahead. Keep going.
nope, nope.
I'll write it
You
down.
go, you go. Yeah, no, you go. This safe space. Go ahead and
Okay.
share. Yeah.
So I mentioned before flipping the classroom, and that's a completely other topic that you could probably chat with people for hours about. But another complaint that I hear from teachers, the number one is time and whatever they need that time for, whether it's learning the tools, implementing. Um, right now, the elementary teachers that I support, they tell me that they have one period out of the entire day that they have their full class. Students are being pulled out for instrumental lessons or for counseling
Oh,
or reading support or math support or speech, with resource room, whatever it might be. They don't have their entire class for more than one block in a day. So, what am I teaching in that one period? Math? Am I teaching reading? And I feel bad when I go in, I'm like, all right, we're gonna have fun and we're gonna play with this tool today. And then the other teacher shows up to bring them to their support, which is fun and important too, but you know, they want to stay. So it's really difficult. So using these ed tech tools, I think are important for flipping the classroom, or if the student is missing, like to go back to how we started this conversation 45 minutes ago, you show the video, whomever was absent or at their support services or band lessons, they missed the video. How are they supposed to watch it again? So by posting it on your LMS or embedding it in a program, they can watch it. I'm trying to advocate for teachers to do centers more often. So and that's something that I did way back in the beginning of my career. I had my color coded spreadsheet because I was the only one with a computer. I could make a spreadsheet. So I have a color coded spreadsheet um, when the students were in and out of the classroom. And so I would make sure they rotated to whatever station when they were there. And the teacher can't be at all
mm,
five stations. So using these ed tech tools to flip, pre-record your math lesson or pre-record the science experiment or whatever it is, and let them watch the video or use the tools. And then you could get that feedback if they understand it with the embedded support within the programs. Like I'm trying not to be specific for one ed tech. Yeah, clone yourselves. Yeah, we're not there yet. so so
well,
and in the
so,
middle,
but Sophie,
yeah,
Sophie really means like
yeah.
if you make a video,
Oh, you are
you've
cloning
cloned yourself. You've
yourself.
cloned yourself, and okay,
I'm stealing that,
so
Sophie.
yeah, and Sophie and I talk a lot about this in the professional learning that we give, and like I tell teachers, I'm like, look, it doesn't matter if students are in the room or if they're on the moon, they have you. Regard. Oh, don't worry. Over at Cami,
Doing all of
we got
this.
all the lingo. We got all the lingo. Don't. If you want some lingo, come talk to me and Sophie. But yeah, no, that's what she means by that. And it's so like it to support what you're saying, Michelle. Like for substitutes, for students that are absent, teacher, like students coming in and out of the room for
All
various
day,
different
revolving
things.
door.
Yeah, and it just makes it a more equitable experience, right? And I want to add, and maybe this was just because of the COVID days, right, where everyone was at home doing this, but my parents like, thank you for putting the work in, for allowing this content to be there in all of our lessons and all of your lessons, because now I better understand what my
Right.
students are doing in your room.
I was a middle school math teacher, and like Sophie said in the chat, I did centers as a middle school teacher. Also, they're not just for elementary school, but New York State was the first to switch to Common Core. And I
Mm,
was an ELA teacher and a math teacher, so I had two brand new curriculums. So math was done differently. It's not better, it's not worse. I particularly liked a few things about Common Core, but the parents didn't learn it that way. So
sure.
what I did was I had a blog. I don't even think we had Google back at the time. And I recorded my math lessons on my smartboard. I recorded it and I posted it. And I ended up getting hits from all over the country because parents didn't know how to help their students, their children with the math. And so I'm like the poor students down in Georgia, listening to my fast Italian New York, and they're nice, slow with their Southern accent. They're listening to this New Yorker go super, super fast. But yeah, you instill that you are cloning yourselves. You have the resources for the parents too. So
Yeah.
important. And you're gonna have to explain what microwave means. So if
Oh,
you put
okay. So,
that,
okay. So I don't, again, I try, like, I don't talk a whole lot about Cami on the show, but I can bring this up. So, sometimes at Cami, it's like when we were in the classroom, like, oh, I want to go see someone teach. So sometimes Sophie will pop in session. Because we want to learn from each other, right? Kind of like what we were
right?
talking about with the cloning thing, with the clone yourself thing. And so Sophie was like losing it in the chat or on camera, maybe off camera. But you know how, like, when you're when you're in Cami and you're maybe you take something out of split and merge and you just
Hmm.
want to
Love it.
like love it, right? And teach, but it takes like a second or two for it to load sometimes, kind of like it's loading. And then
I know where
so
you're going with
you
this.
you don't want to just sit there and just be like, hey, waiting, right? So I kind of developed this thing. I'm like, okay, cool, folks. Got it split and merge. Boom, 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 boom. Cool. So right now, it's turning in the microwave. It's warming up. And as soon as we get that purple button, I'm like, ding, it's done. We're going on to the next thing. And and Sophie's the worst person to watch me teach because we know each other so well. We're like, she loses it, and then I low key lose it too. And people will be like, but we're all having fun, right? So yeah, so that's my little microwave thing that you might catch,
Well, so we
whether
get
it's at a conference or whatever.
for like a minute in the microwave. Like I remember getting our first microwave, how old I am, and like it was amazing. You could do this in a minute. Now it's like a
Yeah,
minute. This is taking forever. And I laugh too with the ed tech tools, whether the AI is going to populate it for you or Cami, like, oh, this is taking forever to split and merge. Meanwhile, if I tried to do it manually, it would have taken days, but that minute in the microwave, it's so funny. Um,
yeah, yeah.
that's
No,
great. But
that's
I'm
her. That's
stealing
her
the
little
clones.
things. Yeah, yeah. Definitely still anything that you want. Yeah. And so yeah, that's her little fun that we have in
And
our
I'll
company.
share something that I stole from Book Creator, something that I had done with them. He calls it writing with your face. So when you're using the text to speech, you're writing with your face. So I like that. So when you're taking the writing, the physical writing out of it, you can still write, but you're writing with your face by using the text to speech. And then you could go back
I
and edit, revise. So I like that too.
I love that for like explaining it to like younger students, right? Like
Yeah,
it's like it cleans up the language, I think, for them.
right.
No, that's amazing. So Michelle, like I knew this was gonna happen. Like we're running out of time here. And so I'm trying to be respectful of everyone's time. But the one question that we did not get to yet because it's been a party is and so it's like the one question show, right? Really, like, I know I end up asking a lot of questions, but like the focal point, like the focus of the show is what is under the hat for you right now in terms of what you're seeing in the classrooms within education, maybe in your district or maybe like on a more grander scale. What is top of mind for you right now with what's going on?
Wow, you should have given me more than a minute to think about that.
I'm sorry. I'm
Um,
sorry.
that's okay. It's a different answer for teachers and students. Like right now, I think the teachers are just overwhelmed with how much they have to do and how little time they have to do it. I think that's the biggest struggle right now in education is having teachers find that time. So I'm hoping this last hour teachers got some ideas, maybe not specifically, but you're more than welcome to reach out to me on social media. And I'm more than happy to brainstorm whether it's a specific tool or a strategy. It's something I'm very passionate about. Even though I'm not a special education teacher, I never was. I don't have my degree in special education. So, yeah, time. Teachers need help.
Yeah, 100%. And I did down below drop
Thank
Michelle's
you.
Twitter, X, Twix, whatever you want to call it. Uh we dropped that handle down there. So if
Instagram,
you
Facebook, Threads,
all of it,
TikTok. I
yeah.
don't do the talk much, but
I'm
all the
scared of
things.
that. Yeah, I'm scared of that.
Yeah.
I'm not in that space yet. I don't know if I ever will be. But we are coming up towards the end here, friends. So those that are here in the chat with us, really appreciate all of you. Michelle, we appreciate you and all the time that you spent. We'll have to do this again because I felt like
I would love to.
we only touched the surface, I believe, in this conversation. So we'll definitely have you back. Friends, don't forget about the show itself in the sense of going to that website, underhatpod.com. That is the one-stop shop for the show, whether you're trying to catch up on episodes or social links. It's a great way to get over to the Spotify, the Apple, wherever it is that you find your podcast. And again, thanks for everyone that is continuing to show support for the show, for me, and all the work that we're doing here at Under the Hat. Appreciate all of you. And as always, keep your hats on, but keep your minds open. Have a good night. Until next time, let's wave bye.
Thank you. Thank you.